Hey man, before we get into your good work, I want to begin our conversation with 5 years ago, this pandemic threw all of us into so many unknowns. Ultimately,
Mhm.
how did you survive it, and how did it change the way that you do things now?
Yeah. Well, I at the time I lived in a rural area, and I used to say to people, like when I look out my window, I don't see the impact of it. So I would have this very stark experience. I had two children under the age of 3 at the time when it
Yeah,
started. So I was already sitting at home in my pajamas as it was, and I would do my work that I do, and I would work over the internet with people, and then I would drive into town to get groceries or whatever, and I'd listen to the news, and it was like a transition from my little rural paradise to this thing that was happening in the world. And I think in general, uh, my wife and I, we were just quite happy to avoid participating, especially given that we had young children. So it didn't really change the way that I operated. I'd had a job before, a few years before that, and I just sort of switched to working online all the time. And I was just really grateful to kind of miss. I missed a lot of it. If anything, it just kind of cemented my lifestyle a little bit more. Uh, the remote work. Yeah.
absolutely. So let's get into your work as a spiritual teacher. I want to know if kids always get the truth out of us. If I was to put you in front of a bunch of 12-year-olds at career day and one of the kids was curious and said, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How would you answer that child?
Oh, that's a great way to ask the question. People want to feel good.
Yeah.
And there's lots of ways to try and feel good. If you're a child, you might try eating candy or going on roller coasters. Or if you're a little bit older, you might get a sports car or get the girl of your dreams or get a job that you really love. And all of those things are wonderful. My job is to help people feel good, independent of everything that they acquire or do in this life. People to feel good just being themselves, just experiencing themselves. And moreover, I believe and I help people that if you start with that fundamental well-being, as it's sometimes called, it will help you do all the things in life that you want to do anyways. It'll help you in your work and the way you relate to colleagues, the way you parent your children, your physical health. So it's this belief that instead of uh, like acquiring to be well, we start by creating a base of a foundation of well-being, and then we live from there.
So when you were 12, what did you want to be? What was your dream
Oh
job?
man. I want it to be like you're in Kansas City. I want to say I want to be a baseball player. I want to be a hockey player. I wanted to be a musician. I was not really sure, but like the menu of great occupations or lifestyle that the Western world gave up, you know, I was into all of them. But spiritual teacher was not on the menu. Not did not cross my mind that that's what I was going to do. And I'm this is what I'm actually built for. Like I just compare it to some athletes. I always think of Michael Vick, the football player. That guy was built to do exactly what he was doing. He's gifted,
Yeah.
gifted. And I was not gifted to be a football player or a chess prodigy or a musician. So I loved all these things, but I didn't have the discipline and the drive. And I had, natural ability, but I never was able to really sink into anything. And I felt quite lost. I spent most of my childhood thinking about like what great thing, what am I going to do in the world? What excellence am I going to achieve? And I had a lot of the felt sense, had a lot of the experience of failure. So it was only much later through a lot of hardship that I kind of landed on healing and spiritual transformation as a life path. And I found that I was so happy to find that I had a tremendous work ethic and it felt like I had a natural ability and I had like a fascination with it. And I found a way to apply myself to move towards excellence that didn't feel hard, like it wasn't hard work. Whereas all the other things felt like I was kind of going against the grain. Yeah, I was forcing it.
So take
So,
me. Oh, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
No, no, no. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I don't think there's anything more of substance that I need to say. I would repeat
Well,
myself. Go ahead.
but and I'm curious, taking that one step further, take me back to your childhood. What were these foundational elements, do you think, that were planted into you that finally made you realize this was your path? Because that's the thing about life. Sometimes we have to live a long time, or at least a little while, to get to a point where we find out what our voice is. So,
I had
what do
to
you
live.
think happened in the beginning that made you feel like your journey culminated to this actual mission?
Yeah, I'm loving your questions, your
Cool.
approach here. Uh, well, in many ways I had a really fun, loving, lovely childhood. And I had my father was like my best friend when I was a kid, and he really inspired this sort of search for excellence. He was an artist, and whether it was art or music or literature or film or sports or academics, it was just this constant conversation about what is great and meaningful, and having fun exploring these things. And as I got older, I got kind of less fun. And one of the things that happened is that my father died when I was 12 years old. And the way he died was not it was like a tragedy. It was a sad story. So as much as him and I would talk about greatness, like the actual reality of his life was actually really unwell. And the older I got, the more I recognized this, and it kind of hung over me like a shadow. The older I got, the more I really struggled to figure out what to do and to apply myself. I started to develop a I used drugs when I was a teenager a lot, and I just got more and more and more lost. And when I was 24, I got sent to a treatment center for addiction. And at that time, if you'd asked me my life story, I would have said, I've screwed up everything. I've screwed up everything. But as soon as I got to treatment, everything flipped for me. In like a moment, I realized actually I have my whole life ahead of me. If I'm interested in spirituality and trauma and healing and all of these things, actually my life is really good curriculum. The things that I've struggled with actually aren't impediments. They're actually my path. And so all of the things that happened, the wonderful things and the painful things with my parents and my culture, all of these things started to um, make sense to me. And I realized that I'm not going to be great at something external. I'm going to be great at something internal. And I realized like there's no opposition, there's no opponent. It's just you and yourself. It's essentially at least it's the starting place. It's just you and yourself. And I felt very confident about it. So, my whole life, every parent teacher conference I ever had, this was the conversation. It was like, Blaise, you're so capable. You're kind of like a joy to have in the classroom, but you don't apply yourself. Like, what's the problem? And by the time I got to be 24, I realized like, okay, that innate capacity that everyone, including myself, is trying to find. Like, I can feel it. I can feel what it's supposed to do, how I'm supposed to apply it. I'm beginning to, and really from that time, I stopped having problem. So it was like the way I would describe it is it took 24 years to have a good match between like my true inner self and capacity and actually what was going to show up as my life.
So, have you had a spiritual moment? Have you had a moment with realizing in a moment with it with your deity where it really like shined a light on you and made you feel like this is what I need to do in my life? Any divine intervention, anything like that?
Oh yeah, I like a lot of that. And the first, I mean, some of the first ones were really they weren't very fancy. They were more just like a clear knowing in a clear sense. Like right before I went into treatment, I uh, I had a friend who was really into spirituality in his version of that, and I remember listening to him talk about it. And at this time, I'd kind of realized that drugs are a dead end. Like there's nothing, it does not go anywhere productive. It gets darker instead of getting brighter. And I thought to myself, "Hmm, well, I guess spirituality is like all that's left for me. Like that's the only door that I haven't gone through." And I just this really clear sense that that's what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And I didn't doubt it. It was just like it was a gift. It was just it derived for me that this is what I'm going to do. And over the next sort of few months and years even, that got clearer and clearer and clearer. And so that I, over that time, drugs kind of scramble you. And with any beginning in spirituality, you don't really know what you're doing at all. Nothing really made sense to me, but like I was in the right area. And a few years later, I started having like really um, powerful experiences, just awakening experiences or strong experiences of sort of the revelation of the nature of reality uh, that moved it from like at first it was spirituality is something that I'm going to do to awakening is something that's happening to me, and now I just have to deal with it.
Yeah.
So it stopped being work, and it started being like this is just what is happening to me, and I just show up and deal with it day after day after day,
Yeah.
and that's much easier. So that path has taken me through, many, many big experiences and progressive transformation, which, yeah, now I use in large part as support. I use in my work. So all the things that have happened to me personally uh, find some way to become of service to others today. But yeah, the experience of what would you call it, revelation, or that's been pretty continuous for the last 12 or 14 years.
So, who's been that inspiration that's allowed you to find your path, to find your voice in this life?
Well, in many ways, as hard as it was, I would still describe my father. My father actually, he was into this. He was into spirituality in his own way. I don't know. I really don't have a sense of his success with it. I don't think I was old enough to really understand what he got out of it. But he set a kind of template that I say being a spiritual teacher was not something that I was in my childhood or in my path or spirituality in general. But that's not totally true. In some ways, my father set a little bit of a template for that. And then some years after I went through treatment, I did the recovery thing pretty seriously, well, for a couple of years. And then I found a couple spiritual teachers. My wife, who is now my wife, actually introduced me to them. And it wasn't like I chose them. It was like when I heard them speak or when I saw them, like I just needed to know what they knew.
Yeah.
And I just absorbed everything that I possibly could from these two men. And it gave me inspiration, like they could do it. It gave me a modeling because I would watch the way they behaved and what the way they spoke and what they did. And it gave me a real clear sense of like I just didn't know what was possible, and they sort of showed me that. So I modeled myself after these two men for who were different, but I modeled them after myself after them for a long time, and it's only really recently that I've uh, kind of broken through that mold. It's the same thing that happens with parents or kids and their parents, I think, especially with their fathers.
Yeah.
Is like if you grow as a child, you grow under the umbrella of your father or whatever, and then at some point you become a man and you pass on. And in movies they'll have the king say, "Son, you are now fit to." This is like this graduation thing that young men have. And I didn't have that because my father died, and it really messed up my adolescence and development. So in many ways, these men were kind of like surrogate fathers. Like
Yeah.
they were role models, and for a long time, I lived in myself. I mean, they don't know me, but they were my like father figures, and I lived under the umbrella. And then sort of recently, I sort of feel like I'm ready to be my own person. It just happened when it was ready or when it felt natural.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. If we get off this call and a time machine pulls up and
Yeah.
you could go back in time, whether biblical times,
Mm.
whatever spiritual realm that you want to go to, and you want to witness something, whether it's, you know, a moment of Jesus's life or the Buddha or from the Hindu faith, if you could go back into one spiritual moment on the timeline, what would you love to witness see happen?
Hmm. Well, again, nobody nobody's ever asked me that question before. Um, I'm going to give a heavier answer.
Yeah,
I'm going to say the fall. My job, I'm a trauma therapist,
yeah.
and when you work with people with trauma, what they have are symptoms that they have pain, they have dysfunction, they have challenges in their relationships, they act in ways that they don't understand, they're reactive. And the job of a trauma therapist is to help people feel the beginning of that. It's like a trauma is a moment or a period of time that creates a pattern, and then you live on top of that. So when you help people with trauma, you help them go back to the moment or the period of time or the relationship where this pattern started. You don't do that psychologically. You do that by experiencing it with them. So as just a simple model, somebody gets bit by a dog, and then from ever on, they are just afraid of dogs. So what you do to help people, I mean, there's lots of things you can do, but you feel the first time you get bit by a dog. And if you can process that, then you don't need to defend yourself against the dog in the future, all future dogs. That's a really basic model of the way our systems protect ourselves. If something overwhelming or painful happens, then we develop this inner mechanism that stops it from happening again and stops us from feeling the thing that has happened. So when I look at the world, I think the thing that has fascinated me the most is like in biblical terms, they would say that the world has fallen. In my language, we live in a traumatized world. And most people, like when they relate to that, they like that's normal. Like that's the assumption that this is how people are. And it's my experience, it's my belief, like when I look deep inside, that that's not actually natural for human beings. It's not natural for human beings to be violent and afraid and to have division between us. And so I feel it's my duty, actually, to help us recognize what has happened to us and to restore the the kind of purity, the naturalness that is essential to being divine beings. So that's my job. My job is to help that process of restoration. So anything that I can discover of the sort of before, the what happened, and the after, the more that I can feel that story, the more use I can be to people.
So at the end of the day, of everything that you've accomplished and evolved into, what are you the proudest of? I know pride's not it can
Yeah.
be an ugly thing, but
The most proud thing the thing that I have accomplished the most is that I I got my I got my work ethic back. When I was 24, like I described, I before that, the first 24 years of my life were hiding, avoiding, lying, minimizing pain, trying to squeak out as much pleasure as possible. I just did not have discipline or a work ethic, no matter how much I tried to have it. Um, and this period of time that I've spoke about a lot when I was 24, it was a complete reversal of that. So the thing that I have that I rely on every day is my integrity, my willingness to see the truth, my willingness to feel uncomfortable and painful, my willingness to be wrong. I call it my work ethic. That's my vehicle. That's that's the thing that I can rely on, and everything that I accomplish, everything good that has happened to me or will happen to me is a product of that. So to me, having that restored is the most important thing that has ever happened to me.
so at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, clients, everyone that knows you, but you run the
Yeah.
show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Hmm. You think there'd be a really simple answer to that?
It's never simple. This
The thing about awakening or a spirituality in general is what you wake up is to that there are many facets to life and there are many facets to yourself. And I think to every person that I meet, there is a different facet of myself that may stand out to them. When I'm with my children, I am their father. When I'm a spiritual teacher, I'm a sort of loving being that's looking to bring as much light and healing into the world. Without that, without having some position of service, without being of use to somebody, most of that is not particularly important. Those are the things that I do because it's what's called for from life. And like when I am with myself, I think my answer would be that I'm a mystery, that I don't have such a solid identity. And in that there's peace. So I take responsibility really seriously. I love being a parent and a husband and teaching and working with people. And so if you define me by what I do in the world, if I were to define myself by what I do in the world, I would say responsible.
So
That's my,
if anyone has any questions, they want to take this further, they want to hire you, they're
oh yeah.
curious, where's all the good business? Where would they go?
Yeah, my website is primary place where I interact with people, blaisekennedy.com. And I run a YouTube channel where I teach about consciousness and meditation and healing from trauma and all of the other facets of what I do. And you can find me, again, Blaise Kennedy on YouTube. Those are the primary two places.
Okay, I will put those in the show notes. Blaise, thank you so much. Third time was a charm. I'm so glad we got the chance to meet and talk, and I love the interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Hello, friends. Joe Dimino here. I just wanted to let you know that after 30 years or so, I have finally released my first book of poetry through the mighty Spartan Press here in Kansas City, Missouri. As the creator and host of both Neon Jazz Radio and the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino podcast, along with being a visual artist, I'm ready to embark on a new adventure and want you to be a part of it. You can get a copy online via Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and actually on the streets in Kansas City at the great Prospero's bookstore off 39th Street. You can also visit joedimino.com for links to the book, to more poetry, and everything in my world, including paintings. Thanks for all of the love and support over the years, and please dig the words.